Hello everybody, welcome to Leftology, and today I'm going to be doing a video on Pascal's wager. If you're an atheist or agnostic person, you've probably experienced this type of argument for religion from religious people, whether that be from Christians or any other faith-based religion that proselytizes. But in this video, I'm going to go over what it is basically, what are the grounds that it is built upon, the different versions of the arguments, and the different objections to the wager argument. So if you just want to know more about it, or you actually want to, I guess, fight against it in an academic sense, or at your family's Thanksgiving or your Christmas meetup, this may be actually fairly helpful for you. But let's get into the groundwork for the wager itself. So Pascal didn't originate the wager. I'm not exactly sure who did, but he comes to the conclusion that the wager is needed because he sees the other arguments for religion, whether that be the ontological argument, the teleological argument, or the cosmological argument, which are both, all three of which are either founded upon a priori reason, which is the ontological argument, or trying to base God off of things that they can witness within the universe. Pascal sees this as not able to prove God. God is beyond the universe to a degree. If it's going to be faith-based, then you can't really prove him within the universe per se. John Mesnard says on Pascal, quote, "The illusion of the Christian apologist who believes that he is able to base the affirmation of God on certain reasonings is only equaled by the illusion of the atheist who believes that he can base a negation of God on the weakness of these reasonings. Both are mistaken about the true capacity of reason, which cannot bear any judgment concerning the absolute. Reason is truly efficacious only within certain limits, but its power is great enough so that it can grasp its own impotence." So, the wager is founded on trying to make you consider that your reason is limited. You can't prove God, but you also can't disprove God. So you have to make a bet to get to religious belief or not. You can't really decide not to believe something here because it is one or the other. Even the agnostic person, to a degree, has to pick a side. That's why we don't have this idea of true agnostics. We have agnostics that lean towards religion and agnostics that lean toward atheism. But let's go ahead and get into the different versions of the argument. The first and weakest version of the argument is the argument from dominance. This argument is best, I guess, put into a table, which I'll try to put all three of these into a table and show them on screen. But what it is the very basic version of the argument where there is two options: either God does not exist or God does exist. And this is presupposing a Christian God, by the way. And there are two choices that you can make. Either you don't believe in God or you do believe in God. If you believe in God and God does exist, you get into heaven. If you believe in God and God doesn't exist, nothing happens, you rot or whatever. If you don't believe in God and there is one, you go to hell. And if you don't believe in God and there isn't one, you rot. The problem with this argument and why it is the weakest is that within life, there isn't just no difference between a believer and a non-believer here. Whether you might even go far enough to say that a believer's life is better or an atheist's life is better, which we might explore later throughout the video, is a difficult claim to make, but it does have to be factored in. And these next two arguments for the Pascal's wager are going to account that in. And it still holds that you should pick religion in these. The next one is going to be the expected utility argument, which has a little bit different basis. And I'm going to start this section. This is the basis for the next two arguments with a quote from Yujin Nagasawa, description of Pascal's wager as, "If we believe in God, but he does not exist, then we will have wasted time when reading the Bible and praying to God. This is bad, but only in a limited sense. If we believe in God and he does exist, then we can go to heaven. This is infinitely good. On the other hand, if we do not believe in God and he does not exist, then we save some time by not reading the Bible and praying to God. This is good, but only in a limited sense. Yet if we do not believe in God, and he does exist, then we will go to hell. This is infinitely bad. Therefore, we should believe in God. This is the basis of the next two arguments. So the expected utility one is basically that there is a limited good and bad to whether believing or not believing, but for all four of the, squares within Pascal's wager, they need to be, the utility overall needs to be multiplied by the chance that they will become realized. So let's say there is a 1 in 100 chance that God does exist, then the infinite good and the infinite bad need to be multiplied by 1% in order to reach the expected utility out of that, and the limited good and limited bad, whether that be believing or not, need to be multiplied by about 99%. And then you add that together and you make the cost-benefit analysis then. I guess the expected utility argument doesn't necessarily say that you should go one way or another, and that's where the principle of insufficient reason comes in, which is the last version of the argument that I'm going to go over. So as I view the principle of insufficient reason argument, it's kind of an extension of the expected utility argument, in that once you get past this 0% chance that God exists, the weight of infinity within the argument is so much that even multiplied by such a small probability that as long as the possibility of God is above 0, it has to be in your best interest to believe in God. That's the best way to sum it up. And I guess my only critique of that is that in how people frame these logical arguments, that once you have two options that you can't know the percentage of, you have to base them both at 50-50. So God doesn't exist and God existing are both 50% chances, because we can't get to those numbers within human reason. I would rather say, and this is, I guess, an extra objection, that it's not that there's a 50% chance that God exists. There's a 50% chance that it's either 0 or 100. It cannot be both. So we can't necessarily know if it's above 0 or not, is my only critique. So let's get into the critiques. I have about 4 or 5. The last one's kind of a particular manifestation of the last objection that I think is really strong and can hold up against the Pascal's wager, the strongest out of all of these critiques. So the first one I'm going to be going over is the Evidentiaries Critique, and this is mostly espoused by William Clifford in his principle, which states is William Clifford says this in the Ethics of Belief as, quote, "It is wrong always, everywhere, and for anyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence." So basically, Clifford is saying here that because we cannot prove God, it is irresponsible and amoral or immoral to believe in God. And there is a critique to this, and I don't think that this critique is particularly good because we believe so many things that we don't necessarily have good evidence for. William James responds best to this, and Andrew Chignall best puts his position as, quote, "In The Will to Believe," which is by William James, he lays out a series of strict conditions under which an option counts as genuine and believing without sufficient evidence is permitted or required. For instance, the option must be between, quote, "live hypotheses," i.e. hypotheses that are among the mind's possibility, in parentheses. Thus, belief in the ancient Greek gods is not a live option for us these days, end parentheses. There must also be no compelling evidence one way or the other. The option must be, quote, "forced," end quote, such that doing nothing also amounts to making a choice, and the option must concern a, quote, "monumentous," end quote, issue. So basically, this just gets back to the idea that you can't really not make a choice based on God. William Clifford's critique doesn't really hold up because there's not necessarily enough evidence to prove the other way either. Atheism isn't really the default choice here. Neither is religion. All you can say is that you can suspend judgment and be agnostic is probably the best you can do on outside of just believing in one way or the other. So that's why the evidentialist objection probably isn't the strongest. The next is the theological objection, which is a objection to Pascal's wager within religion itself, especially the faith-based religions that it pertains to. So they would say, or at least the religious folks would say, that basing your religion and your beliefs on a cost-benefit analysis is not actually enough to get you into heaven. It's kind of an insult to God, and that believing on these premises will get you into hell anyway. So it kind of, taking this cost-benefit analysis into your faith is kind of, I guess, an antithesis to faith itself to a degree. You're trying to believe in God for your own sake instead of God's sake, I guess is the best way to put it. The response to this from Pascal's wager is that Pascal sees his wager as a bridge into faith. And his conceptions of true religion, which we'll get into with the last objection, is that once you get to religion, especially Christianity, there is this, I guess, rejuvenation of life, which is, I guess, that's disputable. But it's saying that the Christian life is enough to where the faith built on top of the cost-benefit analysis of the wager will kind of overrule, and it will become real faith. Is the only way, I guess, to fight this claim. It's that in short, Pascal's wager is not the faith, it is the bridge to faith. It is basically the objection to that objection. The third objection, which I don't have much to say on, is the infinity is impossible objection. This comes maybe from inside and outside of religion, but just having the side of the wager where an infinite good and infinite bad are considered is just kind of impossible within a wager itself. I don't necessarily know if there's a critique to that or not, but if you want to explore it more, feel free to do so. The last one, and the objection you are most likely to, I guess, encounter on TikTok or whatever, or Twitter or in the real world, is the many gods objection. In that, because Pascal's wager presupposes the Christian God, it has to be, it's not truly considering all the possibilities that could be there. So we could say that Hinduism is the true religion. We could say that Buddhism is the true religion. Judaism, Islam, whatever. If we only consider one religion, then we're making too many claims. If it's not just going to be atheism versus God, God's nature is also a dispute in the wager, basically. I guess the only way that you could possibly refute this argument is within Pascal's, I guess, presuppositions to the argument itself. Because he comes in with this idea of true religion, in that if there is a religion, it must meet these requirements, whether or not God exists. So Pascal, to understand this, his version of true religion, we have to go into his his view on human nature. And his view on human nature is that humans are naturally wretched, and a true religion would need to have a descriptive view of humans as wretched. And this is why he thinks Christianity is the true religion, because it has this concept of original sin within it. The flaw, I think, within his argument of true religion is that no matter what true religion you have, I could always say there's an evidentialist God. And this is why I think this is the strongest objection against Pascal's wager, is the evidentialist God. Let me explain the evidentialist God. So it's partially explained in Gregory Mugen and Elliot Sober's Betting Against Pascal's Wager. So Mugen and Sober's wager presents a new wager which includes 3 factors instead of 2, qualifying them as, quote, G equals God exist, P equals Pascal's theory, and X is a theology that says that atheists go to heaven and theists go to hell, regardless of whether God exists or not. So basically, this is a version of the evidentialist God objection, and not one that I wrote a paper on exactly. But no matter what conception of religion, if there is a God that you have, I can always say that it's too minimizing, in that everything you have here could all be correct, except God is not faith-based, he's an evidentialist. So that atheists go to heaven because they believed on reason and evidence and thought that there was no God, and theists go to hell because they were believing on insufficient reason, basically. And because you can't prove either of them, you kind of have to give them the same likelihood. And I got some really interesting conclusions out of this, in that I'm going to try and put a table here, but if you graph it all out, you should have the same order of infinity for a faith-based God and an evidentialist-based God. And so they cancel out. So if you had this as an objection to Pascal's wager, it basically says that Pascal's wager, as a cost-benefit analysis for belief, can only prove that you should believe what has the most benefit for you in this life before you die. Because you can't prove God is an evidentialist, nor can you prove if God is faith-based, and you can't even necessarily prove that God exists. So you kind of have to give them equal likelihood. And because heaven and hell, no matter the God, any conception of it, any conception of the afterlife, I can always say that your faith-based God is evidentialist-based, actually. So these heavens and hells would be on the same order of infinity, canceled out. Limited good, limited bad is the only thing you can consider. So it kind of, trying to step outside of human reason only gets you back inside human reason, which can't prove it. So even outside of human reason, you can't prove one way or the other God exists, nor can you prove if you should exist, or if you, stumbling over my words, if you should believe in God at all. So this is the Pascal's wager, different versions, different critiques. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. And if you have anything you want to add, please comment it. I'll usually respond fairly quickly. But thank you so much for watching.